Galactic Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds and crushed 100 rebellions. Their reach extended across the stars, their fleets an unstoppable force of order and domination. To them, Earth was nothing more than another minor planet, a backward world of primitive creatures who would soon kneel as so many before them had. Reports suggested humans were physically unremarkable, their technology barely reaching the threshold of interstellar travel. But what intrigued the Imperial commanders most was the peculiar societal structure of this species. Humans allowed their women to lead armies, govern nations, and command ships. Grand Strategos Voronzelos reviewed the intelligence reports with mild amusement. "They're just human women," he said, reclining in his throne-like seat aboard the command ship Eternum. "Send a diplomatic vessel. Let them understand their place before we waste resources on a full campaign." The envoy dispatched to Earth expected nothing but compliance. Humans had no real military presence beyond their home system. The Empire had seen species like this before, ones that placed faith in ideals of diplomacy, believing negotiation would protect them. The envoy's orders were simple: inform the ruling class of Earth's inevitable assimilation. Resistance would be met with destruction. What they had not anticipated was the woman standing across from them when the transmission was received. Admiral Celine Ariston, Supreme Commander of Earth's Exodefense Fleet, watched the Imperial emissary's holographic projection with an expression of practiced neutrality. She was a striking figure, tall, with piercing dark eyes and hair cropped short for efficiency. The Imperial representative, a reptilian envoy with an air of condescension, delivered his ultimatum with the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. "You will submit to the Galactic Empire and integrate into its grand structure," the envoy declared. "Resistance will be met with force. This is not a request." Celine's lips curved into a faint smile, but there was no humor in it. "Your empire has miscalculated. If you wish to claim Earth, you'll have to take it by force." The envoy blinked its nictitating membranes, momentarily stunned. "The audacity! You misunderstand the situation," the alien hissed. "Your kind is weak. You are women. We do not negotiate with those who have no place in battle. Surrender, and perhaps your people will be allowed to serve in minor roles." Celine leaned forward, resting her hands on the console before her. The room was silent but charged with the presence of Earth's finest tacticians and officers, all awaiting her command. "You mistake civility for weakness," she said, her voice measured. "We gave you a chance to leave. That was your only warning." The transmission ended. Earth's fleet mobilized within the hour. The first engagement was supposed to be a demonstration of Imperial superiority, a swift and merciless strike to crush any foolish notions of resistance. A detachment of Imperial warships, sleek, monolithic vessels bristling with advanced weaponry, emerged from hyperspace just beyond Luna's orbit. The fleet's commander, Admiral Exxon Talareth, had no doubt the battle would be over in minutes. The Earth fleet, however, did not behave as expected. Human vessels did not engage in the traditional formations that the Empire had encountered in other species. They moved erratically, unpredictably, breaking and reforming with unnatural coordination. The Aegis, Earth's flagship, led a precise assault, weaving between Imperial cruisers in ways that defied standard naval doctrine. Talareth watched in growing disbelief as his ships struggled to lock onto targets. The humans utilized electronic warfare with brutal efficiency, jamming Imperial sensors, disrupting targeting systems, and feeding false data into enemy interfaces. By the time the Empire's fleet adapted, half of their warships were either crippled or destroyed. Celine stood at the center of the Aegis's bridge, observing the chaos unfold on the holo display. Her officers worked seamlessly around her, executing strategies with unwavering discipline. She knew the Empire's weakness wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their arrogance. They had never faced an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. A transmission from the Imperial flagship flickered onto the screen. Admiral Talareth's face was taut with fury and disbelief. "What are you?" he demanded. Celine tilted her head slightly, her expression calm. "We're human women, and we just destroyed your fleet." The transmission cut. Moments later, The Imperial flagship detonated in a fireball that illuminated the void. The surviving Imperial vessels scrambled to retreat, leaving behind debris and broken warships. The first battle was over and Earth had won. Selene exhaled, the weight of the moment settling over her. This was only the beginning. The Empire would not accept defeat lightly. They would return in force. But when they did, Earth would be ready. The Galactic Empire had never suffered humiliation on such a scale. Word of the defeat at Luna spread like wildfire through the Imperial ranks, reaching even the highest echelons of command. What should have been a simple annexation had become an unthinkable embarrassment. The human fleet, led by a force of so-called inferior women, had shattered an entire battle group with surgical precision. It was not just an insult, it was a challenge. Deep in the core of the Empire, within the obsidian halls of the Imperial High Command, Strategos Vorinsailos listened to the reports with his jaw clenched. His advisors spoke in hushed, panicked tones, speculating on what new, unfathomable technology these humans had developed. Theories ranged from stolen alien war doctrines to some kind of psionic warfare. But Zailos knew the truth was far simpler. The Empire had underestimated them. That mistake would not be repeated. The retaliation was swift. The Second Imperial Armada, one of the largest battle formations in known space, was mobilized with the sole objective of eradicating Earth's resistance. Hundreds of capital ships, planetary siege weapons, and the most advanced dreadnoughts the Empire had ever constructed were deployed. Their target was not just Earth's fleet, it was the very foundation of human defiance. The Empire would burn their worlds, cripple their leadership, and ensure that no other species ever entertained the notion of resistance again. Selene Ariston watched the long-range sensors from the command bridge of the Aegis. The scale of the Empire's response was staggering. A fleet of this magnitude had not been assembled in centuries. She had expected a counterattack, but this was a declaration of extermination. Her officers awaited her orders, some with silent resolve, others with barely concealed tension. But fear had no place here. The first battle had proven what humanity was capable of. Now they had to prove it had not been a fluke. She turned to her tactical officer. "Send the signal. Initiate Operation Chimera." Within moments, Earth's counteroffensive began. Unlike the Empire, which relied on overwhelming force and rigid doctrines, Earth's fleet operated with flexibility. Guerrilla warfare in space was a concept the Empire had never encountered, and humanity had mastered it. The first strikes came not from the main fleet, but from hidden outposts in the asteroid belt, automated drones that emerged from nowhere, striking at supply lines before vanishing back into the void. Massive capital ships that relied on centralized command found their communication lines severed, their targeting systems compromised. Entire squadrons were left adrift, vulnerable to rapid human assault craft that darted in and out of their formations like specters. The battle was not fought over days, but over weeks, the Empire bleeding out through 1,000 cuts before they even reached Earth. Admiral Vorinsailos seethed as the reports came in. The Empire was losing more ships than they had projected, not in direct combat, but in ways that were infuriatingly difficult to counter. The human fleet refused to meet them in open battle, striking from angles the Empire was unprepared for, retreating before retribution could be dealt. He slammed a gauntlet fist onto his command console. "Cowards," he spat. "They refuse to stand and fight." A nearby officer hesitated before speaking. "Sir, they are fighting, just not the way we expected." Zailos turned, eyes burning. "Then we will force them to fight." The order was given. If Earth would not engage in traditional warfare, the Empire would break them by other means. A contingent of Imperial forces was diverted to attack human colonies beyond their homeworld, hoping to draw the fleet away from their defensive positions. Planets that had sworn loyalty to Earth, supply stations that sustained their forces, all became targets. Selene had anticipated this. The Empire did not innovate. It retaliated in predictable ways. She had no intention of allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement. At Titan, Saturn's largest moon, the Empire's forces encountered something they had never seen before: the full-scale deployment of Earth's experimental cloaking technology. As the Imperial warships approached the icy moon, scanning for any sign of resistance, they found nothing. The silence was unnerving. Then, without warning, the first ship in their vanguard exploded. From the shadows of space, human vessels emerged like wraiths, their hulls reflecting the void itself. Precision railguns tore through Imperial shields before they could even raise defenses. What should have been a planetary bombardment turned into a massacre of Imperial forces. Xalos received the battle reports with growing unease. These weren't just opportunistic attacks. Humanity was luring them into death traps, manipulating their every move. They weren't fighting a war of desperation. They were fighting a war they had prepared for. He studied the tactical projections. The human fleet was unlike any enemy they had faced. They adapted too quickly, anticipated weaknesses too precisely. It was as if they understood the Empire better than the Empire understood itself. Then the realization struck him, cold and undeniable. It wasn't just that humanity was fighting back. It was who was leading them. For centuries, the Empire had dismissed the idea of women as warriors, tacticians, or leaders. But in humanity, it was their women who commanded the greatest warships, who orchestrated battles with ruthless efficiency, who had spent decades studying the Empire's tactics in preparation for the moment they would be called to defend their homeworld. The final battle of the campaign loomed. The Empire's forces, battered but not broken, regrouped for one last overwhelming assault. Earth's fleet, though smaller, had the upper hand in strategy. Selene stood on the bridge of the Aegis, watching the enemy movements unfold. This was it, the moment that would decide whether Earth would stand or fall. The Empire still believed its might alone could secure victory. They were wrong. Selene allowed herself a small smile. Let them come. The final battle was inevitable. The Empire had bled more than it ever had in its long, tyrannical history, but it had not yet been broken. It could not accept defeat, not at the hands of a species it had deemed inferior, led by warriors it refused to acknowledge as equals. The might of the Imperial Armada now converged upon Earth itself, determined to drown the planet in fire. Selene Ariston stood at the command bridge of the Aegis, watching the holographic display as the largest fleet in human history took formation. The cold vacuum of space outside was alight with the glow of engines, weapon systems charging, and the silent, collective breath of millions of soldiers preparing to face the greatest threat their species had ever known. The weight of it settled on her, but she did not waver. Every simulation, every contingency plan, every sacrifice had led to this moment. Humanity had no more room to retreat. If they lost here, Earth would burn, and with it, everything they had fought for. "Status report," she commanded. "All fleets in position," her tactical officer replied. "Outer defense grids are fully operational. Cloaked strike teams are standing by for infiltration maneuvers." Selene nodded, her gaze locked onto the incoming formation of the Imperial fleet. It was a monstrous sight. Countless warships, dreadnoughts larger than cities, and siege platforms capable of rendering entire planets lifeless. The Empire was no longer concerned with conquest. This was extermination. The incoming transmission was expected. The image of Strategos Voron Xalos flickered to life before her, his expression a mask of controlled fury. "This is your final chance, Admiral Ariston. Surrender your world, or watch it be reduced to ash." Selene regarded him with the same cold intensity she had held since the war began. "I could say the same to you, Strategos, but I think we both know how this will end." His scowl deepened. "You cannot win. Your fleet is a fraction of ours. You fight against inevitability." Selene tilted her head. "Then come and prove it." The transmission cut. The first wave came hard. The Empire's war doctrine relied on overwhelming force, a tsunami of destruction meant to break enemy morale before battle even truly began. Earth's fleet met it with surgical precision. Advanced kinetic shielding absorbed the initial bombardments, while automated defense platforms lacerated the oncoming ships with devastating accuracy. Human vessels, smaller and faster, maneuvered through the chaos with unnatural coordination, exploiting gaps in the Empire's formations before they could be reinforced. Then, the second wave arrived, this time direct ground assaults. Drop pods and planetary siege units descended upon Earth, aiming for major cities and military installations. But humanity had prepared. For months, the best minds on Earth had worked to turn their own planet into a fortress. Automated drone swarms intercepted dropships before they could reach the surface. Anti-orbital artillery ripped through descending warforms. And within the cities themselves, resistance fighters emerged like ghosts, striking before vanishing into the shadows of ruined landscapes. Celine's plan had always been simple. Bleed them. Make them fight for every inch. Give them nothing for free. The battle stretched into hours, then days. The Empire had never faced an enemy like this. Humanity did not break. Every time the Empire adapted, Earth's forces shifted their strategies. Deception, misdirection, and raw, unrelenting willpower turned what should have been a massacre into a war of attrition the Empire was ill-equipped to fight. And then, the turning point came. Celine had held back one final weapon, a trap designed not just to win the battle but to end the war. Hidden within Earth's orbit were the Erebus platforms, experimental energy disruptors capable of shutting down an entire fleet systems within seconds. They had never been tested in a full-scale war. There was no guarantee they would work. But there was no other choice. Activate the Erebus array, she ordered. Across Earth's orbit, stations that had remained silent throughout the battle now hummed to life. A ripple of energy surged outward, invisible but devastating. The Empire's fleet flickered. Then, one by one, their ships went dark. Engines sputtered, weapon systems collapsed, and communications were severed. For a full 5 minutes, the invincible Imperial Armada was reduced to nothing more than floating debris. Earth's forces did not hesitate. In those 5 minutes, the counterattack was absolute. Human warships tore through defenseless cruisers. Planetary defenses unleashed hell upon stranded ground forces. And within the Imperial flagship, Voron Zelos could do nothing but watch as everything he had built unraveled before him. The war was over. As the last remnants of the Imperial fleet fled, broken and humiliated, Celine finally allowed herself to breathe. They had done it. Against all odds. Against an enemy that had never before known true defeat. Humanity had stood its ground. Earth had won. But she knew this was not the end. The Empire would never forget what happened here. They would return, whether in years or centuries. But when they did, they would not find a weak world waiting to be conquered. They would find humanity. And this time they would know fear. The wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted in Earth's orbit, a silent testament to the impossible victory humanity had claimed. Fires still raged in the lower atmosphere where debris had fallen. But for the first time since the war began, there was no immediate threat. The battle was won, yet Celine Ariston stood rigid at the command deck of the Aegis, knowing that peace was not yet secured. Victory, after all, was not the same as survival. Reports poured in from every front. The enemy retreat had been chaotic, entire squadrons abandoning their comrades in their desperation to escape. Across Earth's surface, resistance forces hunted down the last remnants of Imperial ground troops, ensuring they could never regroup. The war was over, but the cost was undeniable. Cities lay in ruins. Once thriving colonies had been razed, and millions of lives had been lost. Celine's gaze settled on the tactical display, tracing the retreat path of the surviving Imperial vessels. It was too early to tell if this was truly the end or merely a pause before the next battle. She knew the Empire's nature. It would never accept defeat. Not truly. The question was whether it had been wounded deeply enough to hesitate before striking again. The comms officer turned to her, face drawn but determined. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Imperial command ship." Celine exchanged a glance with her second-in-command, Commander Elias Voss. A cautious man, Elias had been her voice of reason throughout the war, tempering her calculated risks with hard logic. Now he merely nodded. "Put it through," she ordered. The screen flickered, revealing a shattered remnant of the man who had once embodied the Empire's cold, unrelenting power. Strategos Voron Zelos sat in the dim lighting of his crippled flagship, his once pristine armor now scorched and battered. The fury that had burned in his eyes before the battle had dimmed, replaced by something else. Something Selene had never expected to see in an Imperial officer. Resignation. "I did not believe this outcome was possible," Zelos admitted, his voice steady despite the weight pressing upon him. "Not from your kind." Selene folded her arms, expression unreadable. "And yet here we are." A bitter smile tugged at the edges of Zelos's lips. "The Empire will not forgive this. Even if I were to order a retreat, there are those who would see this war continued for centuries, no matter the cost." Selene studied him carefully. "And what do you want, strategos?" For the first time he hesitated. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of their failing ships. Then softly he exhaled. "I want to leave this battlefield with what remains of my fleet. I want to tell the Empire that Earth is not worth the cost of further bloodshed." His gaze sharpened. "But that will not be enough. They will need proof." Selene understood instantly. A war like this could not end with mere words. The Empire needed to see its defeat. "You want to surrender publicly," she said. Zelos gave a slow, deliberate nod. "If I do this, if I broadcast my surrender across the Empire, it will shake them. They will question their own invincibility. It will buy you time." Elias shifted beside her. "Time for what?" Zelos's expression darkened. "To prepare for the day they return." Selene inhaled deeply. There was no illusion of lasting peace, no fantasy where the Empire simply accepted its failure and moved on. But if they could create doubt, if they could fracture the belief that the Empire was untouchable, then perhaps the next war could be delayed, not by years but by generations. She made her decision. Do it. The broadcast was sent. Across the stars, from the Imperial capital to the outermost colonies, the image of Strategos Voron Zelos, once a symbol of unyielding strength, kneeling in surrender before a human admiral, played on every screen. The reaction was immediate. Shock, outrage, fear. The Empire, for the first time in its existence, had lost a war it had started. As the remnants of the Imperial fleet limped away, Selene stood on the bridge of the Aegis, watching them vanish into the void. She did not celebrate. There was no victory in war, only survival. And humanity had survived. For now.